What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I am so honored to introduce you all to satanic ritual abuse, mind control, and organized abuse survivor, overcomer, and whistleblower, devoted wife, content creator, podcaster, published writer and author, IT extraordinaire, and a remarkable young woman turning her powerful testimony into a masterpiece of redemption, Angel. A little bit about Angel and what you guys can expect to hear about on today's episode. When most people look back on their childhood, they are flooded with tender memories. Those recollections feel like a gentle melody of innocence and love. For Angel, the melody was shattered before it could even begin. Instead of fireflies and hugs, she remembers being a sad, terrified little girl shoved into cages, ritually abused in unspeakable ways, and forced to fight for her life in complete terror for 13 relentless years. That is the childhood she carries. Yet from those depths of engineered darkness, Angel has risen as a living testament to the power of faith, resilience, and divine intervention. Born in 1996 to the ancient Reynolds bloodline, Angel's very existence was no accident. Her birth had been meticulously planned for over a century. Her maternal grandmother, a Reynolds, and step-grandfather were deeply embedded in high-level Rosicrucianism. While Angel's own parents were not occult practitioners, the bloodline's legacy reached her through her grandparents. Her distant cousin, Nathan Reynolds, who you guys all know from the show, has courageously shared parallel truths from the same volatile lineage on this very podcast. Angel's story stands unique. The occult did not come through her immediate parents, but through carefully orchestrated generational programming and military ties. Her birth itself unfolded under a strange and orchestrated shadow. As her mother went into labor and her father was struck with a severe, mysterious flu, her grandmother was the first to hold the newborn. In that very moment, Angel was initiated into the occult. Soon after, doctors aligned with the same dark network and extracted her DNA. She was cloned as an infant, switched out in a horrifying process that left physical evidence on her body. Her parents unknowingly took home the clone and raised it with flashes of what seemed like a normal childhood. The real Angel remained in captivity, first in her grandparents' basement, then transferred at around age 6 or 7 to an underground military base where she would endure the next 7 years. For years, Angel's memories were limited to scattered flashes from the clone's life above ground, and around age 25, the programming began to fracture. Confusion, deceptive visions she mistook for signs of God, and relentless torment descended. She believed she was not fully human, that she was on a messianic mission, and that the demons were raping and burning her alive every night. She was lost in deception. But God was not finished. What worked was a raw, relational breakthrough with Jesus. She saw him as brokenhearted and righteously angry over her suffering. That vision dissolved years of resentment toward God and brought profound healing. Today, Angel lives in glorious freedom. She successfully works in IT, her intellect sharp and remarkable. She cherishes simple joys, time with her devoted husband and family, and caring for her body. Through her podcast, Angel's Journey, her voice rings out like a powerful, attention-grabbing anthem of truth, unfiltered, compassionate, and full of hope. She speaks openly about satanic ritual abuse, underground captivity, the supernatural realm, cults, and the conspiracies that once held her captive, always pointing listeners toward the redemptive love of Christ. Angel stands as an extraordinary figure of resilience and faith. Her story moves hearts to tears and then lifts them in awe. It proves that no pit is too deep, no programming too strong, and no bloodline too cursed for the light of Christ to penetrate and redeem. She inspires survivors everywhere. Healing is possible, freedom is real, and chains can be broken. She is not defined by the cages or the darkness. She's defined by the light she now carries and freely gives. Her courage, her voice, and her unwavering stand make her a beacon of hope and an inspiration to all who hear her testimony. Her journey continues to set captives free, one testimony, one prayer, one beautiful day at a time. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, survivor and thriver, woman of God, walking miracle, voice for the voiceless, survivor advocate, passionate purveyor of truth, and my new friend, the one, the only, Angel. Angel, it is an honor to have you on today. Thank you so much for being here.
I had to try not to cry during that. When you say it all like that, it sounds really intense.
I'm sure, especially because this is something that you lived, and this type of abuse, it does so much to fracture every part of you, and it's something that you live with the rest of your life. I think there's a misconception that once the trauma ends, when they hear, 13 years, it's done. It's never really done. It's a whole lifetime of recovery after that. And what a testament for you to be here today, to stand in that redemption of all the years of recovery that you have been in. And I also want to welcome your husband, who we're going to refer to as Batman today. He's going to be here as support, but he's been an instrumental part of your own healing journey. And I'm honored to have him on here today too. And he may chime in here and there. But today we're going to be focused on Angel's story, and husband will be here to help corroborate. So with that being said, let's dive into your testimony. Do you have a place you want to start today?
Yeah. We can start with my birth, I guess, talking about that, and because that kind of gets into the like the Reynolds bloodline and stuff. So I'll state this first. I grew up thinking that it was normal not to remember your childhood. I had no idea that people remembered being 2 years old, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I had maybe like one memory from kindergarten, and then maybe one memory from 4th grade. And then where my memories start is it's a very specific place. My first memory is being 13 years old. I had just had clavicle surgery, which comes into play later. I had just had clavicle surgery, and I was walking the halls in middle school. I was in 7th grade. And that is where my memories started, like most of them. And then like I would remember like being in high school and like, play basketball and like whatever and all this stuff. And I thought that was normal until I started hearing things from people. And like I would ask my dad, and my dad would be like, yeah, like I remember being 2 years old and, or 5 years old playing in the grocery store. And I thought, well, that's weird. Like I was like, I don't remember anything. And he was like, what do you mean? And he was like, you don't remember going here and doing this? And I was like, no, I have no memory of that. And so we didn't, my parents didn't really, what are they supposed to say? Like, you lived it, you were here, there was you, there was a body. Like, what do you mean you weren't there? And so that was always kind of strange in my life. And I just didn't understand. I just was like, wow, whatever, why would I have any reason to think that that was significant? And so when, so that's one thing, but going back to my birth. So I have also realized throughout this process of deprogramming and looking back on my life and stuff, there is a term that the Lord uses to describe some of the stories that I was told about my childhood. And he would say, quote, unreliable narrator. And if you're a book person, you know immediately what this means. And it's a style of writing, and it's a trope, if you will, in literature, where you read a book and you get towards the end of the book, and it turns out the narrator has a flaw. Whether the narrator is there in an institution and all of the characters in the book aren't real. And then you have this whole thing that erupts of like, holy crap, this entire book that I've read, these people I've gotten attached to, they're not real because the narrator was unreliable. And so I knew immediately what he was saying to me about my parents, and specifically my mom. My mom is programmed and she doesn't know. She very much has DID. I see it today. My dad is not programmed from what I think, at least. But my mother definitely is. And so I would be told these stories and they would have holes in them and gaps, and like assumptions would be made about them. And so, for example, my birth, when I was born, my mom tells this, harrowing story of, oh my gosh, like I read the, what to expect when you're expecting book, and I had no idea that they were going to do a C-section on me. And so she thought she was going to give birth naturally. And I still think that's weird. I'm like, she said that her mom told her not to read that part of the book. Okay, sure. So that makes sense. And what's even weirder is that my grandmother had Christian parts. And so she would have dreams and all this stuff and think she was hearing from the Lord. And I really don't think she was. I think it was very skewed. I think it was just a presenter. But my mom would tell the story of, okay, it was crazy and I didn't know that I was going to have a C-section, and, you were born, and, your daddy was all of a sudden just horribly sick. And like my dad, like never gets sick, by the way, like hardly ever. So I think that's strange that he just happened to get sick on the day that I'm born. And so he couldn't touch me because he had a mask on. He had like severe, he was almost in the hospital with like that level of flu. Yeah, it was like super sick, which is why I think it was witchcraft, because again, it was just like a severe illness. And my mom would always like be super proud that she was like, the first person to hold you was your grandmother. And I didn't realize until later that that's fucking weird. That people don't do that, and that it's supposed to, like, the baby lays on the mother's chest, and that's skin to skin contact, and like, and as I started to do program, these were things that I was like, that's a red flag, like that's weird, so that happened. And I fully believe, from what the Lord has shared with me, that hospital was chosen, and I believe that they cloned me, and then at some point they switched me out. I don't know when they switched me out, but at some point, my parents had in their home. I don't even know if I ever was in their house. Maybe I was, but I don't think it was for very long. I think it would have been very easy if my mother was asleep, and if she's programmed, they could have swapped the infants, and I could have been taken somewhere else. But so my birth was planned for like 100 years. And by planning, I mean there was meticulous iniquity that was passed down from generation to generation to generation until it got to me. And then people ask, like, somebody commented on TikTok, they were like, well, why wouldn't they, choose your mother? They did. She didn't do well. She like failed most of their tests. She wasn't, right. I don't know how to explain it. She just wasn't meeting the standards that they wanted her to meet. And so they kind of, what I call, they damaged her. She is incredibly fucked up emotionally and mental health wise still. Like, she thinks she's great and she's fine, but she was kind of a terror in our household. And I love her. There's good parts of her. But I grew up having, good mommy and bad mommy. And good mommy was amazing. And she loved me and she was fun. And that's the mother that I choose to love. But, I believe that she has these fragmented altars from, failed programming, that it wasn't sticking from what, I understand. And it matches her behavior. And so, sorry, I feel like I'm just super loud, so I'm moving this back. They decided, okay, well, and mind you, like, some of her siblings are programmed. So some of my uncles, like I have half uncles because of my step grandfather. And by the way, like, my mom's biological dad, like, don't know who he is. He's not really, wasn't in her life. I'm still researching about him, like what bloodline that is there. But he wasn't a part of her life. And then my step grandfather ended up coming in the picture, but he was super big in the gospel music industry. He has a couple Grammys, and one of my uncles, super famous. And there's a weird story with him that my mom posted a congratulations thing to him on Facebook and was like, I'm so happy to see how God has blessed you. Da, da, da. He calls her and he said, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. take that shit down. He said, God, you have no idea what I had to do to get to where I am. God didn't have a GD thing to do with this. Click. And they haven't spoken since. So instead of going, I wonder what he means by that. You know, my Batman can attest that like my family is the king and queen of just ignoring things. We don't ask questions. We don't investigate. We don't look into it. We just, that's weird. Okay, moving on. And then we just move on with our life instead of going, what would he mean by you don't know what I've had to do? Like, clearly you're not talking about work long hours because nobody reacts like that to working 60-hour work weeks. So clearly you're talking about something else. So weird stuff like that would happen. So her other siblings are definitely programmed. A lot of them turned out to be drug addicts, commit suicide. There's not one of them that's normal, including my step grandfather's full-blooded children that are just my mom's step siblings. They're all screwed up in some type of way. And most of them aren't even alive anymore because they just exited. They were like, we don't know what's wrong. And nobody could explain what was happening to all of these kids. Like, it was weird. And it was this little small town in South Carolina that a lot of this was happening. And so anyway, so all that's kind of strange. But yeah, so when I was born, they were banking on a lot. There was a very specific program that they knew they were going to put me in. And, you know, my husband can attest to some of this stuff today. We actually just saw a doctor yesterday for my body. And he said some really strange things. And it just like attests to the fact that I'm clearly like was designed to be a machine. Like I was designed to just keep going. And so they planned my birth and they knew what program I was going to go into. And so my ritual abuse, like I remember being very small and I was set on an altar in Opryland in Nashville, Tennessee for a while. So a lot of my abuse took place in Nashville. And then, and we talked about this I spent a lot of time in the base under Kansas City and then in the Missouri. So Kansas City, Missouri, Arkansas, Nashville, that's the area that I mostly spent. I spent most of my time in. I spent a little bit of time in New York, but mostly there. And so anyway, so I didn't have a normal childhood. My clone did, but I don't have any of her memories. Like I have, I don't have any of those memories. So all of my memories are of atrocities until I was 13 and I died in a base accident underground. But yeah, so my first memory is being on an altar in Opryland. And then I was pretty small and there was another gang rape ritual in Opryland again that they were setting me up for. And then I spent like a year in my grandmother and grandfather's recording studio basement in a cage where I was forced to commit cannibalism because they have to get you hooked on blood pretty young, so you can have enough demonic power to keep compiling and adding on to things. And so yeah, and also too, like, and other survivors have talked about this, like they don't want you to think you're a person. They want you to think you are an animal, like you are a beast. And that's literally called the beast programming. And we spent a while deprogramming me from the beast programming. And it explains like why my whole life I just had this rage inside of me that could never be satisfied. Like I was genuinely afraid one day, like I was just going to beat someone to death because I had so much anger inside of me and I had no idea why. And so, yeah. And then like you said in the intro I went through the typical rituals and stuff they needed me to get me kind of like what I call like gassed up to go underground. And I went underground at about 6 years old and was there until I was about 13.
And I want to talk more about that. One thing I want to showcase a little bit is you do come from a bloodline family that you've researched. You've connected it to another guest I've had on here and that people absolutely love, Nathan Reynolds. But this is something that gets really misconstrued in society, in my opinion. I think Hollywood has painted this picture that trafficking, extreme abuse comes from a dark alleyway and some guy wearing black and coming out and taking somebody. And although that happens, that's not the case in many testimonies like yours, where this is a generational thing. This is something that is passed down through iniquity, through generations and generations, decades and decades, if not millennia, before it reaches somebody like you who has the courage to walk away. And we get to learn from you now about what's been hidden all of these decades and all these years. But if you don't mind, could you outline some of what you know about your bloodline and their ties to secret societies and how you discovered your relationship distantly to Nathan and his own immediate family?
Yeah, so I have an amazing follower who had access for me to ancestry.com because I knew that I just, the Lord told me very early on, he was like, you're a distant cousin of Nathan's. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then more things I began to discover and was like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. But I couldn't figure out genealogically like where we were on the map. And so basically my follower is actually a distant cousin of mine too. He's a Reynolds. And so his name is like Mountain Man, like 90 something, or Mountain Man 19 on TikTok. He's great. And so all three of us are actually distant cousins. So we could all get together and have a barbecue or something. But he mapped it out for me and I was like, God bless you. And so there's basically 3 lines. So let's think of Angel, Nathan, and Mountain Man. And we're all Reynolds. And all of our lines go up to a man named Christopher Reynolds that was born in 1493. That's how far we can trace it back. And I believe that we are cousins because we are descendants of his children. And so I am from one branch. Nathan is from another branch and is from another branch. And so that is how we all go back up, is towards Christopher Reynolds. And then even crazier, from Christopher Reynolds on up, and I'm currently mapping this now, we actually can directly, and Mountain Man and I are working, I don't want to say his real name if he doesn't put it on here, but Mountain Man and I are working on this right now. We can trace all 3 of our lineages all the way up to Semyaza, who is the leader of the fallen watchers. That is the one that made them have a pact and say, we're going to go and we're going to mate with women. And so we directly all the way, and we also descend like that. The Reynolds bloodline descends from the Greek gods, which obviously are they're Nephilim. And so we're working on tracing that full lineage, but that's where Christopher Reynolds comes from. And that's how all of myself, Mountain Man, and Nathan are related. Now, this branch is from the Tobacco King, the Tobacco Reynolds, and the Aluminum Reynolds. Mm-hmm. And there was also a submarine that they built from my bloodline as well. So that is the line that I'm from. Nathan is from a slightly different one, which is I forget which, but his is a little more like less public facing. He's right. His branch deals in secrets. My branch dealt in empires. So they were empire builders, and they had Judas coins. And, Nathan talks about Judas coins. And so my side had a Judas coin that would, touch all these things. And so that is who we link back up to. Now, in terms of like my direct descendants, so like, I think I was talking with Mountain Man about it, and when we mapped my actual, and I don't want to say his name because I try to keep my real name kind of hidden, but you can look up Christopher Reynolds. He's a very real person, and then the tobacco line, whatever. But my great grandfather is the one that I tell the story of sitting on an obsidian throne, which is talked about in Rosicrucianism. Now, what I personally think happened is my step grandfather and I think my grandmother, I think they were an arranged marriage. And I think they did it on purpose because I think my step grandfather had some stuff going on and he was a Rosicrucian, and then they paired him up with the Reynolds, and it was a bloodline match because nobody could figure out why she married this guy. Like, he had so many issues, was just weird, and they couldn't figure it out. And I personally think that it was arranged. But so my grandmother is the Reynolds, and then she married my step grandfather, which was already in Rosicrucianism. And there is the story that I tell is that my grandmother tells this story of how she stumbled into the living room and found my great grandfather, which is a Reynolds. That's the Reynolds that goes up to Christopher Reynolds. She found him floating in the middle of the living room on a black throne, and he was levitating in the middle of the room, and the whole room was like consumed in colors and rainbows, and he was sitting on this, they call it literally in the Reynolds, like Bloodline, the obsidian throne. That's what it's called. And he looked at my grandmother and he said, "You have the if too, sister." And her Christian parts were like, "Oh my gosh, like, we love Jesus, like, whatever," which I believe she had real Christian parts that loved Christ. She was just programmed. So she had no idea that all this sat under the surface. And so that is the 13 family bloodline that I connect into. And then, yeah, we descend from a lot of Nephilim, and then supposedly a fallen angel. So, yeah.
How amazing you're able to piece all of that together. That's one of the biggest questions I probably get from survivors, is like where to start with that. And I'm sure that can be very difficult, since a lot of these families do operate in secrecy, and they're involved in secret societies, which aren't, listed publicly for to find.
Also, too, what Mountain Man found was proof from Ancestry.com that my step grandfather comes from a lineage of Masons.
No
in the
way.
town. Lineage of Masons.
That's not on Ancestry? It was able to give that?
He is like an amazing it was totally God that sent me him, because he's 19 years old and he's able to put all this together. He's awesome. I showed my husband and he was like, wow. And, I had been trying to look for hard proof, and of course that's hard to find. So for a while I was just going on what the Lord told me. And so I encourage people that are listening, if you can't find proof, don't be discouraged, because I listened and I didn't have any proof. My whole family thought I was crazy. And sure enough, as of a week ago, I have hard proof that this is very real. But had I not listened to the Lord, I would be dead, because he was right. And I needed to be deprogrammed. It was bad. I mean, I was set to die at 27. So I had a clock that was ticking internally. I had a clock that was ticking. So we really didn't have the luxury of time when we were deprogramming me. So, because my deprogramming started at, when was it? Like 26? I think it was 26. So we had like a year to get me deprogrammed, at least, to where I wouldn't explode.
Oh my goodness. How overwhelming. You're so young, and you've gone through so much, literally living more than one life at times in your childhood too. Now, going back to this birth and this complicated childhood, where you were not only born as one person, but then you're cloned. And so there's two of you operating in the world with different functions and roles.
Yeah.
And I know that you have memories of your life, obviously, and have had glimpses of the other. But as best as you can you explain some of the parallels, between the clone and the non-clone, and kind of where they were operating? And then I'd love to get into the underground, and the things that you were experiencing down there.
Yeah. So what they'll do is they will split consciousness. And I know that's a hard thing. I'm sure your followers are used to hearing that, but it is a thing. And basically what they do is about like 70 to 80% of my consciousness was underground, and about 20 to 30% was in this clone. And I fully believe that, because when I was 13, my mom said, you just woke up one day and you were a different person. She's like, I just didn't know you. And my mom was like actually trying to like forcibly change my personality. And by some grace of God, I think somebody got through to her, and I believe it was God. I don't think she hears him mostly, but I really do believe this was him. And he was like, you need to leave her the way that she is. I made her like that for a reason. And so I think she was trying to force me to be a different personality, and that wasn't going to happen because I now was living fully above ground. And so, so the parallels would be like, there was just this kind of, like I was like there above ground, but I wasn't living. There wasn't a lot of personality. There wasn't, I wasn't that smart. You know, like I was okay at school. Like I did good, but I wasn't amazing. And, you know, people have talked about like they pick that. I mean this nicely, but like part of the reason they didn't choose my mom is my mom doesn't have a super high IQ. I believe they knew when I was born that I was really smart. Like I'm now so smart to the point that I'm on the autism spectrum. My IQ is so high. But when I was 0 to 13 living above ground, like it just wasn't, it was kind of like an NPC. Like I was like there, you know, doing stuff, like just, you know, just kind of there, like not really living in a huge personality and all that. And so now at the same time, you know, the underground me was, you know, going through the Hunger Games and, yeah, going through rituals and experiments and electroshock therapy and remote viewing training, like all that kind of stuff. So I was living 2 lives, but most of my consciousness was underground. And then, you know, and whenever you're ready, we can get into like how I transferred and like how and what happened. But basically, like I got a chance to be kind of normal from 13 to, you know, 26 or 25 or 26. But yeah, there were basically 2 of us living a life. And then the real me, my original body, my real body was completely disintegrated underground in an accident. So now I'm just down to this one. So.
And so is it fair to say that the version of you living with your parents, that was the cover story, the you that went to school and attended church if your parents went, or events? It was like what the public.
Yeah, you know, because how right now they don't believe me, and I don't blame them, because my parents couldn't figure out, how did this happen to you? Because you were always with us. And that's what I'm scared of right now for survivors. I'm 30. I'm scared for survivors 30 and under, because cloning has gotten so good, and they cloned me in the 90s. Like, and I have another follower that it was ex-CIA, and he said in the 90s he had a conversation with the government about the cloning program. He knew about it. He just didn't think they were talking about people. So in the next like 10 to 20 years, like we're going to hear about this cloning program. And the problem is like it hides them better, because if I like, that's why I'm also careful about certain things that I say, because they could sue me for defamation, because there's proof that they could find that I had a life up here, and they're not wrong. There was a person up here, but there was also a person underground, and there's no proof of her because she's gone, except for in my memories and my body memories of what happened. And so that, especially now with younger survivors, they're getting better at this. They're getting better at, okay, before we couldn't really clone people very well, and we had to like switch people out physically, and like now they switched me out one time and there was nobody looking for me. Nobody.
And they didn't even notice that you were different in any type of way.
No, nobody. I had to fight for my life because I knew nobody was coming for me except Jesus. That was it. I was fucked otherwise. I knew it. And they showed me. They would show me pictures of me living my life with my family. And they would say, you just need to get over it because nobody's looking for you, which is harder.
So, that's so devastating. And that has to be so confusing too, trying to like take two lives and fuse the timelines together and like figure out what's parallel, what coincides?
It took me a while. For a long time, my Batman can attest that I would be like, how did this happen? Because I didn't know that I was cloned. I don't think I could handle it yet at one point. It was a lot for me to just handle that I had multiple personalities and like all of this. And the Lord knows like what you can handle at a certain time and like what you can't. And so for a while, we had to do nothing but trust him because there was no explanation as to how this could have happened. Like how there are pictures of me with my mother. Like, how is this possible? And so the only proof I had was my 300 something personalities and my body and how it responded. That was it. That was the only proof we had. And the Lord would tell us like, this happened to you, like you will understand later how the logistics of this like worked out. Like what was important at the moment was saving your life, so it was very difficult.
And your patience has paid off so much that you've been able to remember so much and put it together and piece it together as best as you can to be able to speak. And so you have this one version of you. You have the clone version that's at your parents' house living this cover life. Then you have you, and you're at your grandmother's home in the first part of your life.
Which is screwed up because it was down the street from my parents.
Can you talk a little bit about that, what that life was like? I know you said you're in the basement. So that version of you, the real you, they took to initiate immediately from the occult, but she took you and then used you in programs, put you in programs, used you in rituals. The clone got the regular life. You didn't.
Exactly. And they would show me pictures because my real family was 3 minutes away for the first 6 years of my life. And they would torture me with that. And then when you're a kid too, also like to get me to do things, they would say, do this or we're going to kill your brother. Do this or we're going to kill your sister. Do this or we're going to kill your mom. Or we're going to kill your dad and your family's going to be homeless. Like you're telling a 5-year-old that. So that was part of the torment, was knowing that I was just a hand's length away, or like not even an arm's length. It was like just a pinch away from my real life. And then eventually when that stops working on you is when they start taking you underground, because they're like, okay, this isn't working anymore as motivation. She needs different motivation. So, but so my grandmother took me at some point. I don't know when, because it's not really a memory I have. I just know that at some point it happened very early when I was born. And, some people would be like, well, why would they just not take the clone? They don't want the clone. Why the fuck would they want the clone? They want my blood. They want my bloodline. They need it. It's pure. That's like an expensive wine versus a knockoff wine. If you had the option, wouldn't you take the expensive wine? Like that's the whole point. It's been aged. It's been refined. It's been perfectly curated for years. Like they want your real body because they need that bloodline iniquity. So they took me and they trigger warning, like they rape and sodomize infants. Mm-hmm. So mind you, when we can tell the story here in a minute, but when I transferred and I was living my life above ground, I had so many vaginal issues. My husband can attest, like I'm still dealing with them today, but like I had vaginismus, which is where your muscles contract and they won't let go. And most of the time it's due to trauma, because your body is trying to expel something it doesn't want in there. It's like you tense up, it's normal. And then I had interstitial cystitis, which is normally from that. I had pelvic floor dysfunction, and this is in the clone body. So all of this trauma transferred to it, but it never left. When I was a kid, I had, by 13, like I just started having I was the healthy now. And here's how I also know something was fucked up, because my brother was the sickly child. And when us kids were growing up, And he all of a sudden got well. And then I was the well child for a long time. And then all of a sudden, about 13, I started having horrible medical issues, horrible health issues out of nowhere. I was the healthy, perfect kid, had no issues at all, no problems. And I never understood why it came out of nowhere. And so anyway, so even in high school and college, like I had an autoimmune disease. Like, I mean, I was like falling apart. I had hypermobility syndrome. Like I had Ehlers-Danlos. Like, I mean, just all of these bodily dysfunctions. I have endometriosis, like tons of issues. And so that makes sense now, knowing what I have been through. That is the body's way of saying, we are traumatized. Something terrible has happened to us. And then on top of it, like my mother, for some unknown fucking reason, decided it was a good idea for her half brother, who is half of my step grandfather, to move in with us when I was like 10 to 14 years old. And he abused me in the house in the clone body. And so he would sneak into my room at night and abuse me. And, you know, I told my mom that at one point, and she doesn't remember it now. So she talks about him all the time. And my dad remembers, my siblings remember, and they about throw her out the window because they're like, why are you talking about this? Like, this person abused Angel. Like, why are you talking about this? So very, very strange things. And then, you know, I was hurt by regular people in life, and you kind of become a magnet for these things because that's what they want. They want to reinforce the trauma and the abuse and stuff. So I had a lot going on as soon as I, you know, was above ground. But yeah, so after about 6 is when they transferred me away and put me in the base underground. But yeah, there was just this clone living a normal life, and she was totally healthy, totally perfect.
And this was in Missouri that you were born, right?
Nashville.
No. Nashville. So you were born in Nashville. And then was that where you spent most of your childhood, or did you move to different locations?
So I moved I was first in Nashville. That was where all the pre-programming was done. And then most of my time was spent in Kansas City and St. Louis underground. And then my clone grew up in Missouri.
I was telling you this, you're the first person I've met who had significant abuse here that is testifying about it. I've heard survivors, this was a part of their journey. They came to Missouri at some point, maybe on a military base, or there was some ritual here, or they passed through it, you know, but Tennessee for sure I hear often. But you're really the first person that has called out some of these places. St. Louis, I don't think I've ever had. Kansas City, that's been one people pass through.
Most of the time in Kansas City and the Ozarks in Branson. There's a massive base under Springfield, Missouri. Massive.
And so let's talk about that transfer. So you were at your grandmother's house from early infant, well, I should say from the newborn, basically, because you were taken there immediately after they traded you with the clone. She was abusing you there, began your programming, began your sexual abuse. And then once you reached a certain age, 6 or 7, that was when the more intense training started, the more intense abuse, and they actually moved you from her home to these different locations. Can you talk about what you remember from that part of your life?
Yeah. So the first years were what I call like regular ritual abuse, which is not a good way to say it, but just normal rituals, you know, it's the programming they have to do to you before you're 7 years old for the programming to stick. And people talk about that. So that's what was going on. And then there were just some parties that I was a party favor for the gospel music industry, which is just sick. Like, you need to be careful who you're listening to worship music wise. I'm telling everybody that. You need to really have discernment in who you're listening to, because the names I could tell you of people that abused me would shock you, would absolutely shock you of who was there. So, but yeah, so then about 6, they pull up in a limo tinted car. You have minimal shit that you can bring. And they don't tell you what's happening because that's part of the fear. They just, you're in a constant state of fear all the time. So I thought, oh, good, they're going to kill me. Like, I thought, oh, good, this is going to end. Great, awesome. I'm going to get out of here. No, that's not what happened. I was probably too hopeful. But I thought, oh, awesome. Like, they're pissed at me, and they don't want to do this to me anymore. And they do that on purpose. They give you false hope. And so it was a long drive. I mean, it was about, I don't know, like 6-8 hours in a car. And you're blindfolded the whole time, so you don't memorize or know where you're going. And so I remember, I know it's the Midwest now, but I just remember being like, there's nothing but like cornfields out here. Like, what is this place? Like, I was in the city before, like decently in the city. And now what I realized, they took me to Kansas City, and where you enter in the base is like 2 hours from outside the city. And then you are brought into some type of government reservation, which is like, it looks like it's like a park. And it's not really a park. It's an underground entrance into the base. And there's a whole city that lives down there. There's Nephilim that live down there in the base. There's roads, there's trains, I mean, it's like the size of Nashville, or the size of like St. Louis, or the size of Milwaukee. Like, it's a city. Like, it is a fully functioning restaurants, food. Like, there are kids born down there that have never seen the light of day. They're undocumented, and they're born down there. And so there's no entrances above Kansas City, like itself, sealed off, no way. You can enter from the Ozarks, you can enter from Springfield, you can enter from St. Louis, but you have to enter and then drive for hours to get there, because that's what they want. So you're just in this tunnel. It's kind of a mind fuck, because you're just in an underground tunnel for 2 hours. And so I'm thinking, like, all of a sudden it's dark. Like, I knew we were in the daylight, and then all of a sudden it was dark. And it was 2 hours of being in the dark. And I was like, are we like, what are we doing here? Are we like digging our way down? Like, what's going on? Like, I had no idea about bases. Like, I didn't know any of this. And there was a Nephilim that my step-grandfather would confer with often. And so he would come to the recording studio basement and would like say things and say this and say that. And so then I believe he was the one that was like, okay, we're going to take her, underground. Like, this has now reached the level it needs to reach. And so, and then like what they're also teaching you from 0 to 6 is like astral projection. They're teaching you opening portals. They're teaching you Enochian magic, especially like advanced people. Like, you have to have a certain amount of iniquity. Like, not everybody in the base could do Nephilim, Enochian, like ancient Enochian magic. Not everybody can just do that. It kills most people, because you have to have enough iniquity to do the magic and let that energy like flow through you. Like, otherwise, like I've seen like soldiers like vaporized by trying to do it. It like burns them. Like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like, it's just too much. Like, it's too much. Like, it like vibrates their atoms too much. So that's the benefit of using what I call 13ers, because especially like the special ones, because they can do really high level magic really young. So then you get really good at it. And then the more rituals they do with you, the more accurate you are. And there's a guy named Bill Schneblin. If you've listened to him, he's pretty awesome. If not, you should try to get him on your podcast, because he talks about, he was a vampire for a while. He lived strictly off of blood, and the guy's really old, so I get him before he croaks, but and he talks about that. But he's like, I'm really old, whatever. But his stories, he was a lycanthrope. I mean, he was the one he was a Rosicrucian. He was a Mason. He was a high level Mormon. So he talks about these things, like what it takes. And so he would tell stories of how like they would do all this shit and do all these rituals and they'd get everything like ready to go and nothing would happen. No entity would show up. You know, my husband jokes in his books and he says that Satanism is a really time-consuming and expensive hobby because you do a lot of things sometimes for nothing to happen. And so why that matters is when you get someone that's like me, you have a higher likelihood and more of a guarantee that what you're spending money, time, and resources to do is going to happen, because we become more accurate in summoning these things and doing these things and going to these places. So then you're in this tunnel and you eventually enter into the actual base itself. And there's not many military people down there in the base where the kids are and stuff. Like there's really not, because if there was a ton of military people, like something would be leaked by now. It's very high level, elite military people. And it's the Nephilim down there that are on certain government's payroll that keep the stuff moving, because they're not going to say anything. Like they need to exist. And some of them look human, even though they're not. And so that base is very much like where I was we would have every now and then a very small group of soldiers come in, and most of them looked horrified of like, what is going on here? Why is there a fucking child? What is happening? And they would be like, you need to shut up. You need to ignore. You're being sent on this mission, like some type of real government mission. And you need this child to do stuff for you when you're there. And they were horrified. Like I had a conversation with a couple soldiers and they would be like, are you okay? Like, are you eating? And I would just look at them and be like, this is me at like 8 years old. Do I look okay? Do I look good? I'm in a base underground and you're horrified by looking at me. Do I look okay? And so it was very few and far between, because of course, the soldiers would be asking questions. And then eventually they would get rank pulled. And that's why military people are the perfect people to involve, because they're trained to see and not be heard, to see and not repeat. And they won't speak out about what they've seen. They just won't do it, because they're in a sense programmed on some level, like on how to speak, how to act, how to not, get in trouble, all that kind of stuff, right? Like they're waterboarded not to talk. So they're the perfect people to witness this stuff. And so, yeah, I've talked about it a little bit on my podcast and stuff, but like it's kind of like prison. You walk in, you're handed a number. I was ironically number 13, which is why I think later in basketball, that's the number I chose. I didn't realize it until later. That's why I liked that number. But yeah, I was number 13, and you didn't have a name. You were just a number. And there's a living quarters for the kids. But there's separate living quarters. So what really sucks is there is this classism that happens with the children. So there's the bloodline children, like me and others, that could do Enochian ancient Nephilim magic. And then there's the others. And the others might be like half-breeds, what they call half-breeds or quarter breeds. And some of them are just like target practice, and it's disgusting. So they're literally treated like we would be. I wouldn't say our life was better, but in the half-breed's mind, it was. Because they're like, oh, you get your own room, you get a little bit better food. And it's like, well, they're giving us better food because we're doing 9 billion times more stuff than you're doing. Like I spend 8 hours a day doing rituals, you spend 2 because that's all you can do. So it's not necessarily better, it's just different. And so they impart this classism because they don't want you to make friends. Because when you make friends, and of course, you form a union here, you could overthrow something and you all could escape. So it sucked because some of the other kids weren't perceptive enough to perceive that, of like, if we stick together, we have a higher likelihood of living. And so Another crazy story is I had another Bloodline kid that I became friends with. And I call her Stephanie because I don't say her real name. But part of my programming got triggered because I ran into Stephanie in real life above ground. And I wasn't supposed to. And we are still friends to this day. She ran and escaped with us. That's a whole other part to my story that I don't really talk about much. She is the granddaughter of Anton LaVey and the great-great-granddaughter of Aleister Crowley on both sides. Yeah. So she was in the same base as me, and we were friends. And so we would do a lot of missions together. And we figured out if we work together, we stay alive. We're going to have a higher likelihood of getting out of here. And but yeah, so I ended up running into her in a church, ironically, above ground. And we triggered both of our programmings to start breaking down, like at the same time. Yep. So, and she's currently in the middle of deprogramming. Her, you'll have to have her on at some point. Her story is very different. She actually had some really rogue, bad alters get in the front, and for a while I didn't know where she was for like a year. She just like went AWOL, and they hated me and Batman. They wanted nothing to do with us because they knew we were trying to help her. They knew that we were trying to deprogram, and she just wanted nothing to do with it. And so she's in a better place now. That altar is now gone, so she's not in the system anymore. So she's working on healing right now and working through her altars and stuff. She's doing self-deliverance with Jesus, so she's doing really good. But anyway, that's what the base is like underground. And then there's a lot more science experimentation that happens. So like I talk about the atrocities that they would do to me, and I would heal because they have technology that you cannot explain in English words up here. You know, one time they injected me with something and the skin on my arm started slopping off into the ground, just started falling off. And I'm horrified. I'm screaming bloody murder. And they have this machine and they'll bring it over to you. And they just stuck my arm in this machine, and it hurts like a mofo. It hurts. But I pulled my arm out and it was perfectly regenerated. Perfect. Nerves intact, everything. Totally fine. So I think what is important for people to understand is like they can literally abuse you to the brink of death and then fix you and then do it again. So it is a constant state of trauma because they know that you could have your leg hanging off your body and they can fix it. It's like a sci-fi movie. So there's just no escape. And then, of course, like your consciousness is going everywhere because maybe you're doing a mission in Middle Earth, or maybe you're doing a mission in Antarctica, or sometimes, they would put me in a Nephilim body, and then I would go, and like one of my Nephilim body trips, like I was a yacht girl for a bunch of billionaires. Yeah. I've told this story before. I don't know if it's a video on my TikTok or something, but that's why I loved being, there's a couple of reasons why I loved being platinum blonde in the last couple of years. I'm like, this isn't my natural color down here, but up here it is, and I'm growing it back out. But that color of hair reminded me of the little girl underground because that's what I looked like. And the Reynolds line is known for having, like, Nathan and I have very gray eyes. And it's funny, on Ancestry.com, they described our ancestors with gray eyes, like steel gray eyes. And then this color hair that Nathan, I don't even know what you call this, but it's like ash. It's like an ash color. But yeah, so anyway, yeah, so that's kind of what it's like. And that's why it was so, most of my most traumatizing memories are in the base, because it's like, it's brutality. Like you can't explain, because of the fact that they can just fix you. And then if you don't do things right, then there's a whole set of cages that they put you in underground. And, sometimes they put things like in the cage with you and you have to like fight it off. Or like sometimes they'll put another kid in the cage with you. and there's supposed to be one of you in the cage. So things like that.
One of the things you talked about that I thought maybe we could shine a light on is the movie The Hunger Games. It's branded as fiction, but in your case, that was absolutely not the case. And in fact, that movie has come out after your abuse and seems to be modeled after your experience. Could you talk a little bit about that and what you went through?
Yeah, I mean, I see why now I was never interested in it, because I think if I were to watch it, I would genuinely lose my mind, because it would be so traumatizing. And people are like, why would that traumatize you? It's not that bad. It's because I lived it. Like, I want you to understand that the Hunger Games is not fiction. It's disclosure. And so inside the Kansas City base is a biodome that has mountains in it, like mini mountains, a forest, a beach, a desert. It's very real, and it live changes, and it's actually a game. We're called stock. They call us stock. And they had a board where it would have the numbers of the children on there. And I was stock 13. And they could invest in you as a stock of who they think is going to win and survive. And Stephanie was in there with me, and she was stock number 9. She was 9 and I was 13. And a lot of your first year there is training for the Hunger Games, but the training they give you is the ability to, like, I'm trying to think how to explain this. They empower you with more Nephilim and demonic power, so you can do more things. It's training your telekinesis and your pyrokinesis. And so I actually struggle with migraines because my brain waves are weird. And they teach you how to use demonic power to partner with changing your brain waves to then, that's how you have superpowers. That's it. It's brainwave manipulation, and it's frequency manipulation around you. And then it's the demonic power all combined. All of that combined is how you can move objects. You can move mass through atoms. And so they teach you more about quantum physics, because then you learn about quantum jumping and leaping, which is like I could leap from the mountains to the forest and escape danger if I needed to. They physically train you. They get you used to breaking a appendage or a limb. And one of my training sessions was they broke my my femur. They broke it. They beat it with a bat, and they were like, "You need to run. Get up and fucking run." So I have a horrible time now, and my husband can attest to this. I have a horrible time now with mind-body association. I'm currently in therapy for it, because that's all they programmed you to do was disassociate. You need to fucking run. You need to ignore the pain. The pain is not a part of you. You need to run. And so most of your programming and prep is like that. That way you learn how to heal. You learn how to keep moving. Obviously, like basic survival skills, but once you graduate from the dome, and they start out with some satanic number. It's like 666, like something like that. It might not be that exact number, but it's some satanic number that, because we don't know. They don't tell you how many of you there are. So you could be down to 3 of you, and you're living in this constant terror that there's 100. So you don't know. There's no leaderboard like there is in the Hunger Games. No. No, they don't tell you until you're the last one. Now, what is similar and I think is creepy is that at some point it got down to like in the future, it got down to like me, Stephanie, and a couple others. And Stephanie and I started teaming up together and they got mad about it because you're not supposed to. It's supposed to be survival of the fittest. And what we would do is we would take turns doing certain things and like remote viewing because it really exhausts you. So we would, she would like carry me on her back for a while and then I would remote view. And then I would carry her on my back for a while and then she would remote view. And so we could conserve energy that way by being strategic in how we used it. And then I was better at some things than she was. She was much better at magic. I was just more of like brute force a lot of times. Like my body could just go and go and go and go, and I could fight for hours. And she was just much better at like quantum jumping us and time traveling and magic. Because I mean, she had so much. I was a 13er, so I was really strong. And it's funny, my doctor told me that yesterday. Like he was showing me some things. He was like, I thought you were like, I was doing like tests and he was like, I thought you were going to break my finger in half. And I don't go to the gym. Like I don't strength train. It's just brute force. And so she was more adept in the magic arts is what I would say because of her bloodline. Like she just was. So, but yeah, it's definitely not, I'm trying to think of what else is similar. The gambling on it, the billionaires, the class system, like, the part they don't talk about is that the tributes that end up dead, their heads end up on a banquet table that you have to sit at. So, yeah. And then after you get to a certain level, like after you've like mastered the dome, basically, I call it the dome. That's when they move you outside of the base. And that's when you actually get dropped in like Siberia. Like, I don't know. We were just Antarctica. That's when you get dropped in Appalachia. Then you get dropped in the desert. Like you actually go to these places because the dome is supposed to prepare you for those. Yeah. So.
Oh my goodness. I thought the dome was like the final thing.
Dome is a testing
the dome
ground.
is like an advanced testing training ground. How long do you remember being in there per event in the dome? Was this elongated like it was in the movie where it seemed like days and days and days? Really?
It was like we spent a year in the dome.
Oh my gosh.
So I didn't sleep in a real bed for a year. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a great bed I had, but I wanted a bed. I was tired. And so, yeah, we spent like a year in the dome. And then it like you, by the time the dome was done, I would say like half of the people were eliminated. So.
How many children do you remember being down there with you when you first got down there versus when you left?
There's probably 1,000. It was like a giant cafeteria that we would eat in. Like there was probably 1,000, and then
oh my god,
by the end there was maybe 50 of us. By the time I was 13. Yeah.
And so you were obviously recognized. You were very smart, and you had this brute strength that was almost inhuman, if not inhuman, in a lot of ways.
It was.
Were those things that they were using you for? Were they using you for things like psychic abilities and strength work?
Yeah. So a lot of times, like I did a lot of like after the dome is when they start using you for advanced stuff. I'm sorry, not after the dome, like after the Hunger Games. Like, so when there's 50 of you left, it's like, congratulations. Like now your reward is that you're going to go on missions. And your reward is these very advanced missions. And so, and it's very strange because like your reward to be one of the 50 is like, you get a nice room, you get a nice shower, like you get, like my room was so ornate and it was so extravagant. And I remember not caring because I was like, I just don't want to be here. Like, I don't care about this room. Like, I don't, I don't care. And like, oh, and then you got to have a pet. You got to have a pet. And so mine was like a rodent of some kind. It was like it was like it wasn't a real animal. Like, it was like a hybrid animal. Like, it was some type of like chinchilla squirrel thing that I really loved. It was cute, but it was not made by God. It was not normal. But yeah, so then the 50 of us, like, we went, like, for example, what the Lord explained it to me as, because I was like, what is the level of this? Like, if Jack Parsons was doing stuff today, we would be one of the 50 that went to consult with Jack Parsons and like open portals for him and like do this stuff. So we were going and doing stuff for the Rothschilds. Like, we were kind of like this mission group that they would like bring around. And then ultimately what they didn't tell us until the end is that we were all entered in for the Second Skin program. And the Second Skin program is how I died. Thank God. But the Second Skin program, which all of this makes sense, what they were leading up to, because you would need somebody with brute strength. You would need someone that was very adept. You would need someone that was basically unkillable. Like, they could not kill me. They still can't kill me to this day. Like, they're still struggling with that, but but it's almost impossible. And they need that because the type of program the Second Skin one is you sharing a body fully with a fallen angel. And so my body was slated for Azazel. And so the Second Skin program was guarantee that when they shoved you in that Hadron Collider in CERN, that you would merge with Azazel and you would be a match.
Can you talk a little bit about that and what you remember from it? And you said you died. How? I mean, that sounds horrible. Was that what all 50 of you had to do after that? Or were there just specific, I guess at this age, you're almost a teenager after all those years. Were they just picking specific kids to go do this? Or was that everybody?
I believe the 50 were slated for it. But for me, they had to make sure that like I was gonna I had enough iniquity and like I was gonna be a good match. So I don't know if all 50 of them were a good match, but I imagine some of them were. And so the others might have still just been doing like really elite missions, like missions where like if you had one kid show up to a government meeting, that's not super strange. 1,000, they'd be like, whoa, what are we doing here? So one kid showing up to the White House to help with something is a little, it's like, that's odd, but okay, like maybe it's just a gifted child. Like, so it's a little less alarming, but like, I also think my theory is that, and I'll talk about the CERN thing, but, they talked about when and babe, I don't remember what attack this was, but this was recently with a war that was going on with us. And like our soldiers, they sent out a frequency weapon. And I have struggled with frequency attacks all the time. Amy Eskridge, who was the scientist that died, they will point frequency weapons at you from satellites in space and they will try to kill you. And a lot of times it happens to me. I can feel it when it's happening. I feel very like vertigo, and because they're messing with my brain waves. And when you mess with your brain waves, like you get really messed up from that. Like people die from that. I should be brain dead from how much they've done this to me. Like the Lord has just kept me and protected me this whole time. Like thank the Lord he has. But
if I can pop in for a second here.
Yeah.
That news story is very important because that news story is documentation that people were disoriented, they were horrified, they were unable to move, they were disarmed. And that occurred, I believe it was this spring, but it's well documented. We attacked Venezuela. And the Venezuelans, when we took out their president, They said, we've never seen this technology. We don't know what they did. It's very disarming. It's very confusing. It's extremely advanced. This is very validating for your guests because these are very obvious, clear signs that the things that they've talked about involving frequencies and what it does to the brain, it's all very clear that those things happened. Those are not tin hat websites that were reporting that. That was AP News, BBC News. So as an author, I guess, or as someone that enjoys writing, I'm always looking for obvious, undeniable ties between this world that people don't always believe exists and the world that's obviously existing right in front of us. And so to me, that's an obvious tie that needs to be highlighted.
Well, in my personal opinion, I'm not saying this is right, but what I personally believe is that there was a type of 50 kid on that mission. And that's who was the frequency weapon. That's why they were confused, because they didn't see them point something at them. They were like, what is this? That's what we were trained to do, is to send out an EMP level attack with your mind. That is what they do. And it does exactly that. It disorients you. Like it's the worst. I would much rather be shot with a gun than be.
Stranger Things is another great example of somebody using sort of a kinetic weapon with their mind. It's not funny. It's not a joke.
Yep. So that's personally what I believe happened in that news article, is a new generation of one of the 50 kids went on that mission, and that's who did that. And they're trying to train soldiers to do this, but most of them can't. Some of them get lucky and they get kind of some 13er blood in there and then they can do it, but most people can't. But but yeah, so the CERN program. So I didn't know that that's what this was for. Now, I had started having meetings with Azazel for a couple years, and I was married to him. So, in these rituals, they marry you and whatever. And like, my husband can attest to you, like, we had to fight him quite a bit. I mean, up until as early this year, he was appearing to me in my dreams and in my house, and was still like trying to do weird stuff. So I didn't realize that that's why they were having me marry him and meet with him and do all this weird stuff. And so the second skin program would genuinely be like, I would be Azazel's second skin, and he'd be able to come into. And so how they were going to do it with CERN is by smashing our atoms together to bring us into one. And I thank God that it was not time for that. And so they're always trying to speed up God's timeline. And because what they were doing was ahead of his time, and he didn't want them to do this to me, I instead died. I was completely incinerated. And I remember every ounce of pain that was. I had the memory come back in a dream, and it was excruciating. It literally feels like, yeah, I mean, trying to describe what it feels like to explode is really hard. And so it obviously didn't work. They didn't merge Azazel and I, thank God. But I did go to heaven. And when I went to heaven, I was brought there by two angels, and I talked to Jesus, and he just told me that he was sorry that this had happened to me, and that this was the end of my life of terror. And he said, I have a proposal for you. And I was like, okay. And I was just happy to be dead. I was like, thank God, like, this is over. It was just so beautiful up there. Like, I hadn't really seen pretty things in so long. And I was just happy to just be up there and see what heaven looked like. And it was pretty. Everything's gold. It was gorgeous. And it was so peaceful. And he was like, you can stay here and you will pass, and that's okay. He's like, I will support if that's the choice that you have. Like, it was a true choice. And he showed me my clone body sleeping at my parents' house in its bed. And he was like, or he said, I can send the rest of you down into the clone. And he said, you will get to live the normal life that you wanted to live. And he said, you will not remember this for a while. And he said, but when it's time, you know, I will come back to you, and I will heal you. And I thought about it, and he let me kind of walk around heaven for a while and then think about it, because he's like, you can stay here. Like, you really can if you want to. I will support that. Most people want to stay. And so I asked him, I said, is there things that you want me to do? And he said, there will be a lot of people that you will help if you go back. And I said, well, I help them with what happened to me. And he said, yes. And I said, then I want to go back. And so I was then at that moment, the angels brought me back down to my street. I remember with the street light, and they walked me into my house, and they like placed me back in my body. And that same night, my clone, which now we're merging, my clone had a dream that she died. And she didn't understand. She had a dream that she died. And she was like, you know, and she went up to heaven, had the same conversation, and was like, who am I going to help? Like, what is going on? And then I told my family about it, because now I woke up in my new body, in my bedroom, totally safe. And I was a different person. It was very different. My mom was freaked out. She took me to a doctor. She was like, I don't know who this child is. Like, I think she's unwell, because my personality was so different. I was very intense. I was very harsh. Like, I was withered. Like, I was storm ridden in a 13-year-old's body. I was very wise. Like, I became a lot smarter. You know, I still kind of struggled, but little did I know I was functioning off of 1/300th of my brain. And, you know, that was like one personality that was like in the front. And I still had a 3.9 in college off of 1/300th of my brain. So, and I had a major, I had several minors, part of a master's degree. So I did all that, like, with very little of brain power. And so, and so I still had weird things happening to me all the time, weird demonic things, just didn't understand why they were happening. But that part of my life was basically kind of locked away. And, you know, I think I put this in the notes that the moment I started watching SRA content, it was like the key was put into the door and it was unlocked. And I started remembering, you know, everything.
That is so intense, because that, I mean, you can explain it. You could probably do an entire podcast episode just on that death experience, going up to heaven twice almost, because both of you had an experience up there, which maybe it was the same experience. Your consciousness were merging the moment that you died, but then coming down and then being placed back into a body, which is also very intense. I've heard from people who have had, you know, death experiences and then they come back alive, just like how draining it is on the body. Even if it's a beautiful experience, it's like a super intense experience being put back in. You had to have been, I can just imagine you probably felt like you just got out of a war, like just from that, even if it was like this really beautiful experience and you're like, thank God that life is over. Yeah. You had to have just on a soul level been exhausted, and then to finally feel safe and to be like, oh my gosh, like I'm not underground. Like there's a sun that I can see, and I'm in a bed that I don't have to go do training and be put in rituals today. And I didn't have to earn my bed. It's just like given to me. Like, what was that like for you? You were so young, but that was still like, you had already lived so many lives already just at age 13.
It was very, like, looking back, it was very obvious what was happening on the subconscious. I felt like I had to earn everything that I had. I felt like I needed to be the best at everything, or like I was going to die. Like it was like do or die. And my parents couldn't understand it. They were like, why are you acting like this? Like I actually had a mental breakdown. Oh, I should probably talk about that. So I had a mental breakdown like less than a year later. And I went into the hospital. And I fully believe now it was because my brain was struggling with this merge. And they thought I had brain cancer. I mean, it was like I had a migraine for a week. No, I'm sorry, 2 weeks solid. They had to put me in a mini, like put me unconscious. They had to keep drugging me with Benadryl because I would wake up and I would be screaming. And my parents are just like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what is going on? Like, they are horrified, as they should be, because they've had this normal little girl. And like all of a sudden at 13, 14, I'm just a mess. I'm just a complete mess. I would wake up panicking, thinking that someone was trying to kill me. I would wake up, like now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, like my brain was struggling to live with these things. And so I think that was just, unfortunately, some of the side effect of like coming back into another body. And, and the Lord's trying to wall off this trauma. But the problem is my body started to show the signs. So that's when I started having hypermobile issues. That's when I started having hip pain issues. That's when I started having chronic pain. And like all of these issues started, coming forward that weren't there before. But I always just had this anger from then on. Like I knew that I had this hatred for God, and I didn't understand why, because on the surface I loved him, but underneath I hated him, and it scared me, and I didn't really understand why that was there. And I also had this very difficult relationship with my mother. Very difficult relationship with her. And I think because she was then my handler at that point, she was, she had this religious place in our household of like, she was the only person that could hear God, and she was the voice of God. And like, of course her God is very religious. It judges people. Everything that happened to me was my fault. I obviously became pretty promiscuous, like pretty young, which I was just, called a whore, instead of being like, why does my young child, why are they interested in sex? Oh, probably because I was sexually abused and these things were shown to me at a very young age and they shouldn't have been. Like a young child doesn't normally think about sex, like, and so I struggled with lust so bad, which of course I did. Like that, you've opened a door to a child, like, and it wasn't supposed to be opened, And so, and I had deep sexual trauma, obviously, and that's when the vaginal issue started. And so it was like this storm that erupted, and it was tough. I struggled, like I would never admit that I was struggling, but I was struggling. And, again, like I had issues in my family that I was running away from. So I got married at like 19 to somebody that, he just wasn't that great, and got divorced, and then eventually, met my husband. But it was like all of my family like reinforced the programming that was done to me, earn your place, God's sitting on a mountain judging you and waiting for you to mess up. And, so there was just, I was emotionally neglected. Like, my parents were present and they were there, but, can you imagine a program person trying to raise a child? It's probably not going very well. She was emotionally unstable on her own, and I was the one, comforting her. I was parentified. Like, so I it's not like I came back to a perfect family. I came back to more dysfunction. And so it just kind of compiled on top of that. And I've really had to work on my emotional intelligence. And I struggle with some of it because I'm like level 1 autistic. So I need really clear things, but like I struggle to feel emotions. Like I don't really feel them like a normal person does. Like I have empathy and I mentally care for you, but I don't feel things. And a lot of that is just from trauma and then from how I was raised on top of it. So the signs were there. I just didn't know that they were signs after I came into my new body.
When you came into your body and merged with the clone, how did that work as far as memories? Did you get some of the memories that the clone had throughout the life, or was that still all blocked out and you literally, yeah.
I have no memories of that clone's life.
Oh my
Apparently we've been to all these different places. I'm like, I don't remember going here. Apparently we went to Disney World. I'm like, I've never been to Disney World. I couldn't fucking tell you what's there. I have no idea. So no, zero. I had zero of her memories and she had zero of mine. So it was kind of like this new blank experience that was happening. So it was almost like and maybe he gave me like another altar that lived from 13 on, because I remember being 13 and in high school and, you know, college, working, like all that stuff. But it was like the 13 to 0 above ground gone, 13 to 0 underground gone. And it was just this new blank experience.
I can't even imagine. And then you're young at that point, but then you start remembering super young also. You're only 30 years old right now and you're speaking out. So you've had some time to heal under your belt. You've been researching. Talk about that journey between 13 and when you woke up and kind of like how that started unwinding for you. You mentioned a couple times where memories were leaking through when you saw Stephanie. And then also there was another point that you mentioned that you had some memory leak through and it pushed some of your past life forward in your conscious memory. But what really like broke the dam for you to where you were like, I get it. Now I know this is what happened to me.
Yeah. So when I met Stephanie at that church, it put us on about a year or two of like constant torment. And we both were probably what people would call today like religious psychosis. And I was about 25 and she was 22. She was like 21, 22. She's younger than me. She's much younger. I think she's 5 years younger than me. So, but when we met each other, we had some weird disoriented memories happening and they came together and looked like it was God telling us that we're going to do these things. But really what happened is that is the
screen memory.
Thank you. Is a screen memory of like what really happened. And so we were remembering the screens and they were making us think that God was telling us we were going to go on these missions and that God wanted us to do these things. And like, you know, I quit my job. I bought this house that I couldn't afford. And like, I mean, all these crazy things. And on top of it, like we were told that like, oh, you need to be tormented by demons and stuff in order to save humanity. Like that kind of stuff that like, And so for like a year and a half, we were raped by demons every night and tortured and we couldn't understand it. We were like, why is God doing this to us? Like, why would he ask us to do this? And it made no sense to me, but I loved God, I thought. So I thought, well, I need to do this. Like, I don't understand. And really what they're trying to do is drive you to kill yourself. They're trying to drive you to end it so you don't come fully awake. Well, before that had happened, I had met Batman the year before and we had kind of dated for like a month or so. And then we like broke up. Like we both were recently out of relationships and it just wasn't the right time. And so then very shortly after, like a year later, I started dealing with this and I, for like 3 to 4 months had been dealing with this without him. And then we started dating again and I didn't tell him about it at first. Like I was laying sick in the bed because I had been burned alive all night. I mean, I really was like full on. It felt like I had 3rd-degree burns all over my body. And I now think it was just the trauma like coming through because I have fibromyalgia now that I'm dealing with. Like I think I'll be healed, but you know, the body keeps the score of these things. So I think the trauma was finally just coming through in my body because of everything that they had done to me and because it was so extensive. And he came and brought me flowers to my door and I wasn't going to answer because I was like, he can't he can't know what's going on. Like, there's no way he's going to understand. I thought he's going to think I'm crazy, and I felt crazy. I couldn't explain this. And so he insisted on coming inside. Stephanie answered the door because we lived together. And I finally told him. And he didn't judge right away. He didn't understand what was going on, but he understood something wrong was happening. And so for about 3 more months, we lived in this chaos of things happening to us and no explanation why, and no understanding. And so the Lord kept insisting that he and I get married. And we had been dating for like 3 months by that time. And so he can tell you his own side of it, but I'll finish how we got here and then he can explain. But I now realize the Lord was pushing us to get married because when we got married, it gave me some type of a covering. I didn't have a covering at all. I had none. My dad had done nothing to keep this away from me. He wasn't listening, and, my dad basically abandoned his calling from God. And so I was just out in the open, just getting shots taken at me all the time. And I truly think had I not married him, they probably could have taken my life. And I think by me marrying him, there was a spiritual law that happened where, the Lord was like, okay, you can't take her life now. She's married. And he knows me, and he's my son, and he's the head of her, so you can't take her life. And so I truly mean that my husband saved my life, not only by what he did after, but initially marrying me kept me from, I really think he would have woken up to me dead in the bed one day, because there's no way my body could have kept going through what was happening. And so eventually I was brave enough to reach out to some resources and be like, what is going on? And of course, why I didn't want to reach out is because of what happened. And we saw someone, and they basically told me that I was a terrible person, that I was awful. I was doing this to myself, the typical, like, they want you to have that experience. So people that are demonically influenced, which this lady was, my husband had said, I've never heard her speak like this ever. And I'm like, I'm sure you haven't, because survivors trigger people to act like this, because we are supposed to, like, it reinforces the church isn't going to save you. You're screwed. You're always going to be like this. You're never going to get well. And so thank God we were referred. We found he had another friend that was like, I don't know what's going on with your wife, but I think you need to go see these people. And so we drove down to Arkansas. They tried to do a bunch of deliverance on me. It didn't work, of course, but they handed us a teaching, and it was about SRA. And I'd never heard of it at all. And his name is Steve Harmon. And we actually talked to Steve a couple times. He's great. He's still doing deliverance for free today. He helps survivors still today. He's awesome. And so we watched his videos, and that was the key that unlocked. And I started dreaming of horrors for about 2 to 3 years. I was dreaming of rituals. I was dreaming of rape. I was dreaming of all these different places, like missions I went on. Like, it was like a flood at that point. And that was when my husband and I had to figure out, okay, you have altars. They started to come out. Like, the first one I think was like 3, and it was like I call it a Rolodex. It was like they were just spinning. They were just spinning and spinning, and it would stop on a dime, and randomly we would get an altar. And so my husband can tell you the story about how he thought it was going to be really simple, and it was not really simple. But that is the story from front end to me kind of having memories leaking through from meeting Stephanie, not understanding them. And then this chaos and torment erupted. I mean, my husband would have to sit there and watch while demons were raping me. We didn't know how to stop it. This is why religious people piss me off, because they're like, well, did you plead the blood of Jesus? You really think we didn't try that? It doesn't fucking work when they have access to you. It doesn't work when you are initiated into the occult. They own you at that point. Like, they did. I had to work to make more of my body and my altars for Christ than against.
If I can jump in here, just real quick.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you and like what was going through your mind during all of this and your part in this, because this is all happening right in front of your eyes too.
Mostly horrified. That was mostly what it was for a while.
But you believed her. You might not have known what was going on, but unlike so many people, you stayed curious and discerning about it and didn't just write her off. I think that's amazing.
I think what I saw was I saw a person that had a relationship that valued Jesus, that wanted to honor Jesus, that loved Jesus. And there was also this deep, somehow at the same time, there was a deep disappointment and resentment for Jesus. And I remember just staring off into space and thinking to myself, I know a very kind, compassionate, forgiving, gentle, rescuing Jesus. And that's the way that he had been for me. And I thought, if she knew that Jesus, I think this would get sorted out, whatever this is.
My
And so,
husband's background, by the way, is Bible school. He did missions in India, and then he kind of walked away from the Lord for a while and then came back. But that's he met and knew the real Jesus, and so that's how he knew something was up. Sorry, just wanted to provide that background.
so for some people, they could have said, "Oh, she knows better. She knows better." Well, this line of thinking makes me crazy because everyone doesn't know better all the time. And this is an extremely Midwestern thing. Well, everybody knows who Jesus is. They don't. They don't. They don't. If they knew, if they looked into the eyes of a compassionate Jesus that's bleeding for us, that's interceding for us, that's done these things for us, their whole life would be different. So we need to collectively get healed of thinking that everybody knows better, and that to me, and I had no intention to get off on this, but I just feel the Lord on this, the Holy Spirit moving on this, but it's transformational when you see Jesus for who he is. And that line of logic is ridiculous, to say that you could see the purity of Jesus and nothing would change about your heart. That's just, that makes the man of Jesus such a weak, soft, puny version of what he really is.
Yeah, I mean, it even took while I was so during the deprogramming, there was a lot of anger. There was a lot of anger of where were you? These people are sitting here sodomizing me and raping me, and they used to call me the gas station. So I would be used in group rituals because they would take from my Reynolds bloodline demonic power and it would be powering them up. And then I would just be passed out for days because they would have drained me of all of my energy, literally. That sounds hokey, but it's true. And it took Jesus coming into my suffering and me listening to him say, Angel, I'm so sorry they did this to you. I was weeping right next to you when they did this, that they were doing this to you. And I've talked about how Jesus will come and he will sit on top of you and he will take the pain while they are abusing you. And they know that they're abusing Christ. And that's why they also enjoy doing it, because they want to hurt Jesus. They love that. They want to hurt Jesus. And I thought this whole time that he wasn't there, that he was just an absent God watching this torment. And what I found out was he was there in my suffering the entire time. We think Jesus died on the cross and it's just done. But actually the cross is getting heavier every day, because what he did is outside of time. And so every time that he laid on the table with me and took that pain from me so I could be mentally somewhere else, that was the mercy of the cross. The cross is happening right now. He is still taking on our sin and our iniquity and trauma that happens to us. And so that is the Jesus that my husband introduced me to was a Jesus that was crying and compassionate and said, they may have done this to you, but I'm going to fix you. I'm going to restore you. They will not take your life. I will not leave you like this. And it doesn't change what happened to me. It's still awful. But the fact that, somebody commented on my YouTube and was like, there's no way you're SRA. You're way too happy. You're way too joyful. You're this, and that. And I said, actually, motherfucker, I'm so glad that you said this, because it actually proves that Jesus saved my life, because I shouldn't be okay. I shouldn't be mentally amazing and have an incredibly high IQ now, which I didn't have before. I shouldn't have an autoimmune disease that's no longer here. I shouldn't be alive and be happy and be joyful. Like, the joy of the Lord is in my life. And I find joy in just being alive now, because I'm not supposed to be, and I got a second chance. And so that is what happens when Jesus comes into your suffering. And that is what my husband introduced me to. And for a while, he had to be my Jesus, because, and maybe you can talk about that, babe, but like, for a while, I couldn't hear Jesus. My whole life, I was horrified to realize, like, I never heard him anyway, but like, I really wasn't hearing him. Like, there was way too much in the way. And so for a while, he had to hear Jesus for me, until I got to a place where I was starting to recognize and things were out of the way, and I could hear him, for myself.
I'd love if DT could answer that, Mr. Batman. And also, if maybe you can answer the question as well. One of the things survivors I find struggle most with, and Angel, you may have dealt with this too, in coming back to Jesus and realizing that he wasn't the one that was harming you. There's still that question of, well, why did he let it happen to begin with? Why didn't he stop it? That's great. He was there with me. Why did he even let this happen? It's his fault. They still try to put the fault, and they have a lot of trouble getting over that obstacle. Maybe one of you guys could talk about overcoming that, and any words that you could offer others who are contemplating that question and not able to get past it.
That's my favorite question. And I'll give my opinion, but I want to hear your side of it, babe. But I struggle with that a lot. I think every survivor does. And it actually was Steve that had a meeting with me. And I told him I was really struggling with this, that he just left me there and he didn't care. And Steve asked me, who did this to you? And I said, well, the Rosicrucian people and the government. And he was like, okay. And he said, where is God in that? And I said, well, he let it happen. And he goes, well, let's talk about that, because that's where your mind is going. Let's talk about let. And I think the gospel that has been preached is that God is in control of everything all the time, anywhere, at any time of day. And if you believe that, I'm sorry, you're wrong. You're wrong. He's not. He abdicated his ability to do that when he gave us free will. Free will is what takes control away from God that he gave you, because he wants you to have free will. And the consequence of me having free will is other people to have free will. And how they decide to use that, I don't control, and God doesn't control. They control. They decide what to do with free will. Why Jesus is redemptive to survivors is because our free will was twisted. Our free will was compromised, because they would say, make this decision or we're going to kill your family. So I make the decision. It was free will, but I was manipulated. It was done under what we call duress. And so it's not that God didn't want to stop them. It's that he can't. We have free will. He is never going to. It's really selfish for people to say, well, I want you to impose on some people's free will, but don't you dare impose on mine. Don't you dare tell me to stop using the F word. Don't you dare tell me not to smoke a cigarette. Don't you dare tell me not to cuss out a guy in traffic. But please make sure you impose the free will of people that I don't like. It's like, who the fuck are you that you think that your free will shouldn't be imposed on, but everybody else's should? Like, that's not how it works. And that is the world that we live in. And people have a choice whether they worship God or they don't, or whether they accept Christ or they don't. And so that is what got me over that, was people did this to me, not God. People abused me, not God. My family not paying attention is what did this to me, not God. My father not recognizing something was strange going on did this to me, not God. And so from a survivor's perspective, then once I accepted that, I was able to then see, even though people were abusing me and I couldn't be taken out of it because of decisions that people made, he was still there with me and healed me after it, which is why I truly believe that Romans 8:28, says that God works all things for our good. And I don't believe he means random things. I believe what he's saying is any bad thing that's done to you that's against your will or that you didn't plan for, I will make something good out of it, no matter what. Because he's saying people are going to make decisions and things are going to happen, but no matter what it is, I will make something good out of it. Babe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you want to add anything to that?
I think the point of view of the survivor is more important in terms of that specific question, in terms of the question about how do you get over that resentment? Because I didn't have that resentment, so that's a good question for her. You asked two questions, and that was one of them. I want to answer the other question because one of them was more pertinent to me. I'm sorry, though, I don't remember the other question that you asked.
The other question I asked was, a lot of survivors say, okay, that's great that God was there and he was not happy I was suffering, but he was there and did not intervene. He did not stop my abuse. He allowed it. So I cannot have a relationship with him. I can't believe as a true Christ follower. It pushes people away, that thought process. And so I'm very curious on both of you, how you've both overcome that individually as a couple, and then of course Angel's perspective as a survivor, overcoming that, dealing with her own ritualistic abuse and having religion twisted on its side for her. But I'd be really curious to hear how you would answer that question, and even maybe how you helped her through that process and her own healing.
Okay, yeah. I feel like for me, when I described this tender relationship with Jesus, my belief is that relationship is important to him. And so when it's valuable to me that he says something to me, or I feel him with me, or he comes and sits with me, those are valuable things to me. And those are choices that he's made to do that. And when I make choices to spend time with him, or to value him, or to be grieved about something that hurts his feelings, or if I'm watching television, sometimes somebody will use his name in vain on the TV, and I'll say, Jesus, you don't deserve this, and he'll say, man, they hate me. And so it's a free will. It's special because on both sides we have a choice to be involved in that or not. And so I think as much as people's free will is taken away, sometimes the word talks about how he hates the taking of innocence. Some people need to meditate on that and really chew on that for a while to think about what that means and why he would go out of his way to say that. Not only that, but talking about the millstone and the children, there's a lot there. But when my free will is involved with my wife and says, I choose, I don't have to do this, but I choose to introduce her to this wonderful Jesus that I know. I choose to believe that she's going to be okay. There is a redemptive ability in that. to redeem free will, to say free will has been a very bad thing for me, but now it's being redeemed to say, okay, free will has saved a lot of grief in my life and changed it into something else. And so free will is meant to be a beautiful thing. And so that's the redemptive nature of it, is that with any love, it's special when it's a choice.
I think maybe too what people might be curious about, babe, is which, by the way, now that we're going to kind of talk about this, my husband is writing a second book right now, which is on self deliverance. So our first book that he wrote, it's about our journey, and but it's through his eyes. It is called The Bloody One. It's on Amazon. I think it's free on Kindle Unlimited, 99 cents for ebook, and like $5 for a physical copy if you really want it. We don't really make like any money off of it. It's just the cost of printing. So we tried to make it pretty cheap. But anyway, so if you want to hear more about my story, there's like so many stories that I haven't even told that are in that book, and you can read about them. But it is through my husband's eyes. But he's currently working on a book about self-deliverance, because a lot of people, we've talked about certain ministries that are charging people for healing, and oh my God, we were dead broke. We're filing for bankruptcy. And I just tell people that flatly, like this, why would I, talk about things that bankrupted, I literally went bankrupt over this. Like it destroyed our life in certain ways, and we're alive. We made it out. We have a nice life now, and we're recovering. But like, it was hard. It was tough. I lost my house. I owned a house at 25 years old, and I lost it. I'll never get that interest rate again. But so there's things that we lost, and it's not worth my life. But the point is, there's things you can read about with that. But a lot of people are asking about self-deliverance. But I thought, babe, maybe you could kind of explain what our process was. Now, I will say something to note, like we had to move states, and we kind of ran for our life because I was unconscious. Once that door unlocked, I started seizing, having what they call non-epileptic seizures for about 16 to 18 hours a day. My husband would have to go to work and wait tables at night, because obviously I could no longer work once this programming was activated, and it was a trap. And so it was a trap for anybody that if they attempted to deprogram me, they would just kill me, because you would essentially, to a point, like if you have enough seizures, you end up brain dead, just so you know, like in the natural, that's what happens. Now, God was not allowing that to happen, but I was full on having like foaming, like seizures. It was very traumatizing to my husband. And so he had to leave and go to work so we could live indoors until we were able to move. But once I moved to the state that God told us to, the seizures pretty much stopped, and we were able to do, all around the clock. I mean, that's kind of how we did this in 9 months, was like, we took what people do once a week for 10 years, and we did it round the clock 24/7 for 9 months. And so that's how I got integrated so quickly. But I think it'd be interesting if you could explain, babe, kind of how the Lord taught you to approach this, and how you kind of had to get rid of some religion that you had, because religion was not, he was doing every method in the book that he knew. He was fasting, he was praying, he was pleading the blood. Like, trust me, there was a lot of blood that was pled, and it was not working, and it's not going to work. And so I think you describing that process of one, realizing, okay, methodology is not going to save my wife. Like, something else has to be done. Like, what was that like for you? And like, in your mind, like, how did the Lord explain that to you? And then how did we approach healing every day?
Yeah, I think going into it, I had this mindset of, God, I can do this. You can tell me what to do. I can get this done. I'm a good soldier. I can accomplish this. And over time, I wore very, very thin. And so my prayer went from very eloquent to help. And help was my entire prayer. After you do this for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours a day for 90, 100, 150 days in a row. We were doing this on Christmas. We were doing this on my birthday. we didn't have a break. It was like I felt like I was in the military, because
constant. And it could happen at any hour of the day too.
2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 7 in the morning, noon. I mean, I didn't really sleep well for probably 12 months. I lost about 35 pounds. I had no interest in food. I just kind of stared off into space half the time. And so I learned that being knowledgeable was not going to cut it at all. And so I had to really lean on him. And there were things in the scripture that he showed me for sure, but it was sometimes elements of his character. Like, he began to speak to me about the zeal of the Lord. And the zeal of the Lord, when he talks about it, it's a Hebrew word. And the root word of zeal actually means a flushing of the face. And so what you have is it's a jealousy towards your spouse, like a protective, possessive, loving. If I saw somebody at the gas station trying to touch my wife, I would get like this immediately. It would be very ugly for them. I would become very uh, energized. And so I was just reading the word one day, and he would say, go and read this story and go and look at this. And there's a story that's so dear to me. He talks about this word a few times, but one of the stories, there is a nation surrounding Israel in the Old Testament, and they were one of the nations that were drinking blood, and they were involved with Nephilim, and they were surrounding Israel. And the leader of Israel at that time said to God, we're going to perish if you don't help us.
We're going to die if you don't help. It was the Amalekites, right?
It was either the Ammonites or the Amorites. There's a bunch of ites, but he sent the angel of the Lord, and he slayed 185,000 of these people in one night. And it was this incredible peal of thunder and wrath. And people don't understand that. Well, number one, these people were more Nephilim than they were people. They were very much a mixture that was unholy. And so God was like, this will not destroy my people. I will not allow this. And so his jealousy and his passion for us is something that he really introduced to me. And so there were times where I would be crying and I would say, I appeal to the zeal of the Lord. And that was all that I knew to do. And there were things about him that he showed me during that time, because I was in a place where I would listen to whatever he said. So it came in all sorts of different ways, but we just went one day at a time and little victories at a time. And her mindset towards him grew fonder, and her strength began to grow, and the discouragements became ever slightly less. And I reminded her of the small victories every day, and we just kept going.
Bless you. You're such a rare gem. I always say, the spouses are the unsung heroes in a survivor's journey, and many partners, spouses, close friendships, roommates, whoever is there as the support, they definitely don't get enough credit in this journey a lot of times. And I'm grateful that you're here, that we get to hear from you directly and get to thank you. But what I know, Angel is an angel herself, but she's surrounded by you. You're both angels in my eyes, and I really appreciate your own resilience and tenacity to stand by her. So sad all the times that I hear that people that were supportive, walk away once a survivor begins remembering or goes on this journey, because it's just so arduous and takes so much time. It's unlike anything anybody can imagine, and even after you're quote unquote done, there's still so much work to do, maintenance, and it's a lifelong thing. But bless you for all the work that you've done, and for diving in and not writing her off and just standing by her. I can feel your protective love for her, you know, and it's just beautiful. She deserves it. And so do you. So I'm really grateful that you guys both have each other.
He sacrificed mind, body, and soul to help me get well at the expense of himself most of the time. You know, that's what people don't see about him, is that, you know, I saw him become broken from helping me stay alive. And he's just now sleeping. That's what people don't see, is that he's just now sleeping normal. You know, he has to have some anxiety medication because we were in fight or flight for 2 years. You know, I mean, I had a part that almost killed him. I almost killed him by accident. I had a part that came out, and she started using her telekinesis on his body, and I almost stopped his heart. And thank God, when I saw him like drop to the floor, somebody else was able to yank that evil part back and get in the front so it would stop. But there was a time that Lucifer came through my body and started speaking to my husband. Like, he spoke to Lucifer many times. And, you know, how do you prepare somebody like for that he's honestly just a teddy bear? I mean, he tells everybody, he tells me, he's like, you know, one time we don't really argue, but we were having I wouldn't say an argument, but we have a misunderstanding a lot. There's a miscommunication because we're so different, and I'm partially autistic. And he just kind of cried one time, and he was like, "You are like steel and stone." And he said, "I am like glass." And he said, "Why would the Lord put me with someone like you who is just unbreakable?" And the Lord said a few things about it. You know, he said, well, one, steel and glass make beautiful buildings. And two, he said, you know, it's not about what you are separately. He said, it's about what you are together. And so, you know, I wish there would be more spouses that would try to help deprogram their spouse, because you absolutely can. I'm not going to say it's not hard, but it is doable. You know, I think we made about 30 grand total that year. Like we were scraping by. I mean, we were doing good just to live indoors, you know, and we're okay now, but it was really hard. But there was carnage after. And so I think I don't want to paint it like it's this easy thing, because you're absolutely right. Like, he's still, you know, we're in a really good place now, but like for a while we had some trauma that from each other that we had to deal with. You know, there was about 9 months where he was not doing super well, which of course, like, why would he never knew what wife he was going to wake up to. That's traumatizing. Like, his nervous system had to get used to, okay, I have one wife now. She's one person. She's happy. She's okay. You know, everything's okay. And so it's difficult when it's your spouse. It's one thing when it's like a patient or it's a client. You know, this is the person you married, and like every day he was tormented by the idea of, is she going to die or not? And he had to choose and believe that God would not let his spouse die from this. Like, that's the encouragement that he needed sometimes from the Lord, was like, I'm going to fix this. And he did fix it. You know, we're both doing really well, and we're going on vacation in a couple weeks, and you know, we're enjoying that time. We're now kind of honeymooning, because our honeymoon was running for our life for a while. So now we're able to rest and enjoy time together, and it's really meaningful. But he was definitely my God ordained spouse, because he was definitely handmade for me. So
I can tell. And the other thing I don't think people realize too is the secondary trauma that people
Yes.
close to a survivor take on. I mean,
Yes.
unless you've heard of this stuff, it flips your whole world upside down, you know. And then whenever you're close with somebody and you find out they've gone through it, somebody that you love and care about and like would do anything to protect, it like hits you different. Like you said, it's different than seeing it from a distance or hearing it from like a patient or somebody that you're not always in close proximity to and aren't, you know, they're not in your personal bubble per se. It's devastating to learn this, and then to have those thoughts of, you know, dealing with the anger of like picturing somebody harming somebody that you love and not, nobody did anything about it, you know, and then taking on these just heinous, horrific events and trainings and tortures and abuse that a regular person can't even come up in their own imagination. Like it's beyond what a person can even imagine. It's beyond what any horror movie can portray, you know, and that's really scarring for people. And I think it's just amazing that you were both able to traverse this together and to keep your heart centered on the Lord through it, and have that be sort of your guiding light throughout everything, that you guys had that foundation and it really kept you guys together, kept you guys focused, and helped you both heal at the same time in your own individual ways. You know, I feel
we did.
you both like fell into trauma together. And I know your trauma began as a child, obviously, Angel, but you discovered it and you remembered it later on in life. So you're re-experiencing everything as if it's the first time. And, you know, so you're going through trauma, he's developing his own, and you're both going through trauma and then healing from it together. And I just think that's beautiful. And you had mentioned that you're both authoring books, and it's under DT Childress. It's under that name, but it's with the help of both of you, even though Batman's the penned writer here.
No. He's the writer. I haven't written any. This is all him. So I will write one soon. People want me to write of my, like, basically like my experience. I'm going to. So you guys can stop writing. I'm going to write it. But he's the main writer for now. I'm just focusing on living life and working. And yeah, I mean, I also would say something too, that like, if you're afraid to go through this with your spouse, like, yeah, it was hard, but like, we have the best marriage ever. We have the best marriage ever. I wouldn't trade my marriage for anybody else's, because, you know, when you've been through something like that together, like, one, you are so much stronger as one person before the Lord. You are so strong, and you have a level of trust in the other that most people don't have. We're only a couple years married, believe it or not. We've only been married for like, I think 2 years, almost 3. It'll be 3 in September. So 3 years married. Like, we don't fight over dirty dishes, like, you know, because I'm able to look at the dirty dishes and go, yeah, this man almost died for me. Like, the dishes really aren't that big of a deal. And so, and we're learning to communicate and understand each other and stuff like that, because we communicate differently. But these like tiffs, we don't really have those. And we're together 24/7. Like, we never want to be apart, you know? So there was such a reward for going through that together. You know, the Lord told us, like, you know, we now don't have to go through some of that early spousal stuff that some people do, because we went through something harder at the beginning. So now we're just enjoying the fruits of being married, and it's nice.
I was gonna say, I feel like you got the hardest thing that anybody could ever go through together out of the way right in the beginning. Like, what if you can get through that? There's absolutely nothing that you guys couldn't get through.
Right. Yeah.
And did you want to talk a little bit about that? And I know that you've written a book about going through this under your name, DT Childress, which I know is an alias, but you've written it underneath that name, and it's from your perspective going through this journey with Angel. Do you want to talk about that book a little bit? I know you have another one coming out that we talked about, but you guys have one that's already out, and I would love for people to go support. And like Angel said, there's more things in there that we didn't get to today.
Yeah, there's lots of stories in there.
So that book, there's miracles in there. There's things that never should have happened that happened. There's my book. It was really sweet, because I didn't want to write it, and I wasn't planning on writing it. And we went to a church service together, and there was this sheepish little intern And he said, "Excuse me." He said, "Are you writing something?" And I was being a butthead. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And I knew exactly what he meant.
And I'm smacking him, saying, "Tell him the truth.
And
Do
I'm
not
like,
make him think he's not accurate in his word." Because I'm a seer, and I'm like, that's the worst thing. That's the worst feeling, that you're wrong.
but this was very dear to my heart. And I thought, I can't have a half word about this. I need a real word. And so I gave him a little bit of a hard time. And he said, "I think you know what I mean. I think you know about writing. I think you need to do it. I think Jesus wants you to do it, even though you're scared." And I just cried. And so this is like 150 pages or something. It's the great majority of what happened to us in terms of the chronology. Okay, it's 105, but it's a lot of stuff in there. But I wrote this and we finished proofreading this within like 30 days of that kid telling me that at the church. And so
Wow.
I took it very seriously, and I gave him a hard time. And when I gave him a hard time and he proved himself, I said, "Okay, you've spoken from God. I will do this." And I didn't have any more issues with it, and I was clear. And so I got the book done. But the title of the book is really, really special to me. And on my journey, trying to do my best and understand how to overcome this, and just spending time with the Lord, I had many times of great grief in my heart. And one of the times I had an open vision of Jesus coming to me, and he was in his crucified form. And so him speaking to me in that way was something that I desperately needed at that time, to understand how deeply he cared and had compassion, not only for my wife, but also for me directly, for being involved in this and for being a part of something that he cared about. And so that story to me really makes the book, because it just presents him in a way that I might never have been able to know him had I not done this. And so that really makes everything worthwhile. And so if I had the option of not doing any of this and not having any of the effects of that, and not seeing Jesus that way and not seeing my wife smile, I don't think that's a very good deal. And so those two things are reward enough for me to feel like this was the right choice for my life. And, my wife and I talked about this yesterday, but I told her, I said, being in a Bible school and being sincere, I said, everybody is obsessed with the gospel and we love the gospel and the gospel. And I got to a point on our journey, and I said, if the gospel doesn't work, I will die and my wife will die. And if it does work, we will live. And that's all the deeper that I could make it, because I thought this is what matters. And the gospel is a vehicle. And if this thing can't make it on the road, if it's pretty and nice and has all these features and can't drive, we're going to die. And if this thing really works, if it's real, if it's not just shiny and pretty and can't do anything, it's not going to work. And I'm willing to take the chance, because if it doesn't work and it's not real, I don't need to be alive anyway, because there's no reason to be alive. There's no purpose in life. We're all just cells and we're going to die. So I made peace with all of that, and here we are.
That's incredible. You've both come together and like found your life purpose through the healing that you've both gone through and the discovery. And I think that's amazing that you're both using that as an opportunity to help people. And I know this book will, and it's so affordable. It's $5. Like, they're literally not making anything off of this. And you should. I wish that you guys, I hope that you guys come out with many more books and, are able to profit from it and receive the fruits of your labors. I know that that's not why you guys are in this, but I want you guys to be able to keep doing this, and you guys deserve to be able to be fully funded in order to devote all of your time to this. So I pray over you guys that continues to happen. And then under this name, and maybe you want to explain, I thought right before we logged on, you told me what DT Childress meant.
Yeah,
do you want to just share that real quick? Because I think that's really cool.
Babe, you can tell them, because you and Jesus thought of this. It was a good idea.
I just remembered growing up around Christian books, and there were a lot of two-letter author titles, and I thought, what was 2 letters that I could do? And I thought, defend the children. And so there we are, DT Childress.
And then the second book that's going to come out, it will also be on Amazon, if I'm correct, and it'll be under the same name, DT Childress. And you guys will be announcing on your social media when that book will be coming out, right?
He's actively working on that. So
I spoke with the Lord about it last night. I think that what I'm going to do is probably, I don't normally think this way, and so I feel like this was him, but I'm going to do Self-Deliverance 1 and Self-Deliverance 2. And so they're not going to be super long, but it's going to be, I might end up with 3 and 4 also, and then I can end up with pushing them together at the end. But I want to get something out probably in the next, 90 days or something, where people can start their journey and start introspection and really begin to go on a path to get their life back.
Amazing. Well, congratulations for getting this one out. And if it's anything like this one, 30 days from kind of start to finish, and then it's on the shelves. I have no doubt that you're going to get all of these other ones done really quick. And hopefully it's just the beginning of the library that you guys will create independently and together.
And then I do have a TikTok and YouTube. So I started it.
This is kind of where we can keep up with you, Angel, and your announcements. Do you want to share a little bit about your YouTube and your TikTok?
Yeah. I just started my TikTok in May, and I've got about almost 12K on there. Yeah. Oh, I have hit 12K.
You do.
It was 11.9 when I went to sleep. So yeah, it's pretty casual on there. Me and Batman do some videos together. My YouTube link is in my bio. I just started that. So I've got 3 or 4 videos on there. It's called Angel's Journey Podcast. And I just talk about different things. I take follower requests a lot. So if there's questions that you want, comment on my videos, and I get video ideas from there, because there's it's kind of like somebody saying tell me about you. It's well, oh my God, what do you want to know? Where do I start? So sometimes their suggestions kind of help me with videos and stuff. And so the first few videos are, the first one I did is explaining the difference between Nephilim, fallen angels, and demons, and what they are and stuff. And then my story, I did do a little bit about the Hunger Games, and then how Jesus shows up during trauma. So kind of similar stuff here, but more personal stories are kind of interwoven. But so you can find me on there. That's pretty much it. I don't really have an Instagram or anything else. I just do TikTok and YouTube.
How exciting. I am just so impressed with the work that you're both doing together as a couple, independently, and just the ways that you're choosing and impacting people through your work and in your individual ways, using your strengths. And it's awesome. And I love the happiness that you both share together. I love that there's a happy ending to this story. And I hope it serves others watching. A lot of survivors watch my podcast. This can be you too. You're all worthy of love and of care, and of somebody who's going to protect you, and of Jesus' love and God, and to be walked faithfully in the direction that all of your hearts desire, and for all of you guys to get the fruits that you've always deserved. And I just love how much hope that your testimony gives, Angel, and seeing you here smiling. I can't believe anybody would comment that that's a bad thing. It's horrible.
I know. What's wrong with you?
And in order to be a survivor, you have to be tattered and crying, and that's a horrible expectation that we should want from somebody. We should be so joyful to experience your joy, that's where you're at. What an amazing journey you've been on. And so anybody who, please don't bring that on my channel, you guys. Maybe block it away. But I love it. I think it's such a testament to what's possible. And I know a lot of people out there are struggling. Did you, before we close up, have any words that you wanted to say to survivors on the other side of the screen?
It does end at some point. I remember in my healing journey, I would just scream into the void, when does it stop? When is there no more altars? Like, when is deliverance done? Like, when am I free? And I promise you that that day comes. I promise you there is going to be a day that you wake up and you are going to be whole. And you may not be completely happy that day, but you will be one person. And from there is where, to me, real freedom starts to happen, because then you are able to begin truly healing and finding joy in life again. And I pray that for all of you, that you have weird people commenting, why are you so happy? Because it should be a miracle that you're happy. It should be a wonder and a testimony to Jesus and what he does in your life, that you can truly be transformed and be a new creation in Christ. And you will be. I promise you will be. I promise it ends. And if you're struggling with tooling, we're going to try to get that in your hands. I begged my husband, because I was like, people are begging for this information, and they're begging for help. And so we're really trying to give you guys some more guidance if you need it. But so more than that, thank you, Emma, for being a voice for people. I've been, watching your podcast. People have been telling me about you. They're like, you need to go talk on Emma. You need to see Emma. And I was like, okay, like, if she finds me, then I'll go on her podcast. And literally the next day, guys, she landed in my inbox. That's what I told God, was like, if you want me to talk to somebody, like, I'm not just going on any podcast. Like, I'm not doing a world tour here. Like, if you want me to talk to people, like, you can put them in my inbox. And literally I woke up to Emma's message. So I'm very thankful and very grateful that you want to hear not only my story, but other people's stories, because you may not realize this, but like how I healed was by watching survivors' testimonies, because I would listen to their stories and it would trigger me in the best way I can say, and I would have more memories come back. And so all I did for like 2 years, was just consume survivor testimonies, because it helped me put pieces together. It helped me unlock more memories. It helped me be like, oh, that can happen in that state, and that person, went through this. And so it helped me put together the puzzle of what my journey was. And so not only are you doing good by just talking to people, but there's people listening that are using other survivor testimonies to help put their own story together. And that's huge. So thank you.
It's an honor to get to do this. And like you said, what a wonder and miracle to get to talk to you. You shouldn't be here. And so we should all be marveling in that. And that's always my takeaway from this, is I get to sit in front of miracles and experience it time after time. And so thank you guys for your time today. And thank you everybody for listening. I'm going to have all of Angel's and DT Childress's book, all of their information down in the show notes, so you guys can go check that out. Please follow Angel on YouTube and on TikTok. So many of you guys ask, how can I help? What can I do? Support survivors. It's free. Go share Angel's content, help get her algorithms up. Comment, just go hit the like button, save it to your saved file. Watch her YouTube videos, share it on your social media. Go buy their book, give it as a gift to a friend. There's so many ways that are really easy that we can support. And I know this feels so heavy to so many of us. We all want to go out and save the world today. And that's a heavy burden for any one person to carry. But together, if we're all doing what we can in small ways and big ways, anything that we're able to, just do something. And sometimes that something is as easy as following on social media and helping support. So I would encourage you guys to go read more of Angel's testimony in the book that her incredible husband wrote about her, and to go support her content, and to keep tabs on when the new book's going to be out, because she'll be updating on her social media with that too. And I hope you guys come on again. I know that there's so much more that we can talk about, but this was an honor having you both on today. And
maybe soon we can have maybe me and Nathan on. That would be so fun.
That would be amazing. And maybe the other survivor too, if he would want to come on anonymously, that's been helping you research, maybe he could come on and talk a little bit about his lines. That would be incredible. Yes, I would love that. And so hopefully we'll see Angel on here again, you guys. But thank you guys so much for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.